Welcome back to Ambivalent Offenders. To any new listeners, I'm going to just get a quick description for you so you know what our podcast is about. Our goal here is to re-examine the various historical figures, as Aaron so eloquently put it in an earlier episode, who live in the gray areas of history. So we aren't looking at classic historical figures who've been vilified for a whole lot of good reasons. Those are people, who have been judged by history, by people, rightfully. Those doors have been shut. We're looking at the figures who are vilified often in their time or perhaps later. It could be due to rumors or political propaganda, other times under new historical scrutiny. So our goal here is to look into historical figures who live in the gray, who loom large, and that people are still debating the legacy of, and come up at the end with our own interpretations, the right ones. But of course, we'd love to connect with you as well and hear your viewpoint, which Spotify I saw now allows. So you can type out and respond if you think
only if you think it's good.
Yeah. No, it's actually not for comments. So it has, there is this comment piece, but it has the actual question about what is your viewpoint on it? So you can, if you think it should be 75% villain, 25% not, you can then write about it too. So you can interact with us we would love, or on any of our social media platforms, Instagram. Aaron set up a TikTok. We've got some reels going. I'm really
these millennials are leaning into the social media. We're wading into the social media pool.
Yeah, we definitely need to watch some how-to videos. But I'm
on YouTube, classic millennial.
Yeah. But I am really excited for Aaron has some great ones coming up, and I have one that I'm particularly proud of.
That's why I had to get on and record so that you can post that reel.
Exactly. Our first three villains have all been men. Not so surprising. Again, only think about serial killers. And not that we're again talking about those classic villains, but
to be fair, a lot of what people mainly wrote about, especially back in the day, it was very rare for them to mention women at all. So yeah, but women were getting our due today.
Exactly. Yeah, equal opportunity. Some feminine energy today. Female rage. I am drinking a cocktail if you hear things being set down. It's not drunk history, so I'm not drunk. This is somewhat serious, but we obviously joke around. If you hear that is...
It's light wine history.
Exactly.
We're in our 30s. We can't do drunk history.
Yeah, I can't do it. No. Okay, so we got some female rage today. Maybe rightfully so, maybe not. We'll see how you feel, because we know women aren't immune to being equally awful humans. So we're totally equal opportunity here when it comes to our potential villain. Last week, I said I was going to do Henry VIII, and then I went rogue and decided to do Typhoid Mary. Since she's a man living in 1300s Europe, how familiar are you with her, Aaron?
I know the general outline, but it's been a while since I've read or heard anything about her. I know there's that classic Radio Lab podcast episode, I believe, about her, but that's probably 10 years ago. So yeah, not super familiar with everything that her life and legacy entails. So this will be pretty new to me.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, and I wanted to challenge myself this week and do someone who I knew, kind of like Aaron said, the basic story behind, but I knew that there would be some challenges to the conventional telling of the story, because if it's just an easy, it's clearly they're villain or not, then they don't really fit in. So
this one will be interesting to see what you found, and especially in the light of world events that have happened in the last 5 years or so.
For sure.
4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and I think that's why I was kind of drawn to that, because it's that whole balance of individual liberties versus public safety, right? How much can you sacrifice of that? And obviously, the public decides that too, the Supreme Court and all these other institutions. But I want to start first with typhoid, because obviously the whole story and the nickname Typhoid Mary is going to deal with the disease of typhoid. Yeah. And honestly, I didn't even really know exactly what it was. I knew some pieces based on her story, how it was spread, but really I didn't know too much about it. So that's where I'm going to start, especially since it's in her name, not her given name.
History. I'm into history, anything medical and scientific, not my strong suit. Although I did, if you remember, back in college, I did take a history of medicine class.
I do remember that. I mentioned miasmas, I think so.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I do like to say that I can, quote unquote, cure things in the medieval sense, which is usually like if it's leprosy, just put them in a leprosy colony.
So it could kind of fit with Mary in a way. So according to the Mayo Clinic, typhoid fever is caused by a bacteria, and it's one most of us have heard before, salmonella. So classic bacteria, a common one, especially today.
It's a
classic bacteria. We know her.
It's the beetles of bacteria.
Yeah, we know her. Today in developed areas, it's very rare because water's treated and we don't have human waste running in the street, getting into our water. Big wins there. So a lot of times, again, this bacteria in your feces, saliva, again, like that contact, right? And so those were the huge pieces were water and human fecal matter, right? Especially when we're talking about the United States in the early 1900s, we're talking about these cities that are very tightly packed. And we're talking about some pretty horrific conditions, especially in the slums. So naturally, those are where you're going to see spikes of these diseases. And I know, Erin, you mentioned
cholera. Yeah, that's a big one. Similar symptoms. I know they're like, I don't remember what cholera is, but similar symptoms and similar reasons for why you get those outbreaks because of people living and
living and
shitting in close quarters.
So as I hinted already, it's often spread from food. So, and that's what we kind of think of it nowadays, especially with like chicken, right?
Yeah.
Like making sure you're using safe food practices, like cooking it. So it's, because again, if it's cooked, that salmonella
high temperature.
High temperature. And water with bacteria in it, or having close contact with someone who's carrying that salmonella bacteria. So that's key. You can get it from somebody who has it as well. So it could be from in the water, could be from in the food, or close contact.
A lot of different. Yeah, I could see why the outbreaks would be so bad because of those
close contact
ways. Yeah, well, close contact, but yeah, there's not just one way that you can get it. I remember reading a couple of years ago a book about the ghost map that Jon Snow wrote. Not that it was a historical Jon Snow, but that was not Game of Thrones. Not Game of Thrones. That was cholera, but yeah, it's spread by very similar things. A lot of times, like the contaminated wells in the city. Dragons, wells and dragons in the city. But that one, especially people where you're dumping your shit.
Yeah.
There's no other way to say it. Where you're getting water. And so it's all clustered in those city areas.
Right.
Yeah.
In your water, where are you putting your dirty water?
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense now, but, if you don't know what germs are, and
that's the key thing.
Yeah. And in a lot of cases, there's not really any other option. The closest well,
right.
You're not going to be trekking somewhere else to dump your waste and such. So, it is very much not a luxury that people in slums in the city at that time could afford.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually at the time in the early 1900s, it's really seen as a poor people's disease. Like in rich settlements where we'll be talking about outside of New York City, you don't have those outbreaks because even if people don't fully understand germ theory, they're not putting, again, the shit in the water. And there's that same place. Like they're purposefully, there's enough knowledge that gonna separate that. We're in the really early stages of germ theory, and That will come up later. And same with antibiotic. Because it's a bacteria, obviously antibiotics would be something you could use against it. But
You had it.
you have them. First, though, I want to talk about the symptoms. So high fever, headache, stomach pain, constipation or diarrhea. Those are those key things. I'll talk about the risk of dying later, like what percentage of people died of it. But
I guess that's not great.
well, actually, but at this time, it's not as bad.
Okay.
Still worse than COVID and things like that. It's still, you're still going to get fatalities, but the number isn't as high as it was in other times. So again, today we have antibiotic. If you end up getting it, that can target that bacteria. As I said, early 1900s, not so much. We already talked about when you think of the cities at this time. I always just keep thinking back to when I'd show students pictures of the progressive era of like what led the muckrakers to want to write about the like horrible things that were going on.
Yeah, the conditions and all that.
I always just think of seeing this photograph of this dead horse and these kids just sitting really like chilling near it. So it's like, again, it's so normalized to have a dead animal.
Yeah.
And again, this isn't a major city. We're not in a farm area. So thinking of all of that going into the water, I just, the little, so you got the little street urchins, crowded makeshift housing. And again, I always that dead horse. Ugh. I'll throw some pictures up on Instagram. If you aren't familiar with them, what cities look like back then. But long story short, these aren't going to be the best places to avoid bacteria spread by people, human waste, and food.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you're talking about how fatal was this? Like all right, I'm in the city. I was sitting by the dead horse, hanging out with my street urchin friends, the newsies, and all that. I got caught typhoid. How bad? What are my odds?
Yeah. So it was still fatal at this time in about 10% of cases, according to the National Library of Medicine. And in the year when the hysteria around Typhoid Mary came out, 13,000 Americans died of it. So to call back the last episode, definitely not the Black Death, but also not pleasant. Like, I don't love those odds. Like,
no, I still wouldn't want to get it. No.
Exactly. And I also don't want high fever, diarrhea, all of that doesn't sound lovely.
No.
Okay. So now we know what typhoid is. Let's move on to our subject of today. Mary. So she was not born Typhoid Mary. But we'll talk about how that nickname.
You mean her parents didn't name her like Typhoid first name?
No, surprising. So we're going to be talking about Mary Mallon. I always want to say Mellon, Mary Mallon, but not Mary Mallon. It's Mallon, aka Typhoid Mary. I'm going to talk about her past. We're going to focus first, before we talk about her quote unquote level of villainous, I want to highlight a few things from her earlier life because I think that's important. Mary was born in 1869 in Ireland, and she does immigrate to the United States in 1884. This is a time when many immigrants are pouring into the United States. It's not the peak anymore of Irish immigration. That was around 1845 to 1852, when actually about 1/4 of the whole Irish population immigrated to the U.S. due to the Great Famine and all that. I got according to the National Museum of Ireland. It's mind-boggling to think 25% of your population.
Yeah, 1/4, and the Great Famine, for people who might not know, commonly known as the potato famine. And I can understand why, even if she didn't migrate during that time, it was such a great catastrophe. Ireland's not going to recover in years or even a decade. So I can imagine why people are still heading to the United States after that.
Yeah, exactly. And she's not born into a wealthy family by any means.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, also, just a plug if people want to know more about the potato famine, there is I'll plug another podcast, but the History Hit podcast called After Dark, and they just did a 2-part series on the potato famine. So if you do want more background on that, go listen. They're good.
Nice. So obviously her parents lived through that time, and still in context, she's moving to the U.S., not like in isolation, but as part of this mass group of Irish immigrants. Many of them are now in cities and they're trying to find work. We're in the new kind of industrial era. So a lot of them, as they come over, we're very, I think as Americans, as we're taught in American history, that idea of Ellis Island, Statue of Liberty, welcoming the immigrants in. So a lot of them did stay in New York City. And the big thing is they're looking for a better life. Those roads lined with gold, right? That whole American dream.
I'm going to guess that, well, I know that things weren't quite that easy for those coming in from other countries.
Right. And while we're not going to talk about it in this podcast, it's really interesting when you're talking about race and like ethnicity and all those pieces, like how the Irish and Italians are viewed at this point, especially if you look at political cartoons, again, kind of that idea of whiteness. But I'm not going to get into that.
No, but do yourself a favor and you can Google political cartoons, early 1900s, Italian or Irish immigrants, and you'll see some not so great things.
Yeah, so they're discriminated against. Like they're not very popular in the cities that they're in. And they're also coming in great numbers, which could also play a part. So unfortunately, most who are coming to the cities, they're going to be in workplace conditions that were unregulated. This is where I have to shout out, of course, Upton Sinclair and The Jungle. It's actually going to be published around the time our story takes place. Our story takes place around 1907. And so right around there. And as a side note, so again, he wrote really famous.
The Jungle.
Yeah, if you haven't read it, I always love how he wrote it to show the horrific working conditions, which they were horrific. Like, people's legs froze to the ground or, lost little fingers and things like that. And those factories that are producing food. And I love how what most people took away was, oh my God, there's rats and
and we were like, who cares about what people are working in? Tell me about what's in my meat.
Right. So that's how the FDA comes about. Yeah. So it's like, I mean, workplace conditions do get improved, but most people are like, oh, look at.
I can't even laugh because that is when I think of The Jungle. That's what I think of. But also workplace conditions.
Yes, I just always think that's funny. So the cities are most certainly not lined with gold. More like gross, dirty, disgusting, dead horses. I guess just chilling in the street again. I can't leave that image out of my mind. Next to kids, like it's no big deal. So it's not healthy for anyone. Okay, so now we're going to go back to Mary. Mary found work as a cook in New York City and a domestic servant. So better than, dying in a factory fire.
I was thinking like Triangle.
Yeah.
Shirt factory. I mean, to be fair, like you don't really have many options as an immigrant woman. You're either in service or you're in a factory. And with those, I would probably, even though I hate cleaning and that, I would still choose service.
Well, especially with kind of where she ends up as a domestic servant, like 100% that was what I would do. Time-wise, we're in the early summer of 1906 now, and she gets a job as a cook and domestic servant for a rich banker, Mr. Monopoly. Just kidding. Charles Henry Warren.
I was like, this is where we get Monopoly. This is where
Monopoly.
Yeah, you could have told me that, and I wouldn't have known. Again, medievalist.
Now, he does have 3 names, so obviously he's rich. Charles Henry Warren. And he lives in a very ritzy and definitely no dead horse zone in Long Island in Oyster Bay, which is apparently a nice area at the time. I know nothing about it. And then Aaron,
I Wikipedia'd it because I was like, oh, that sounds familiar. Teddy Roosevelt had a house there, and Wikipedia also says that Billy Joel has a house there, and Sean Hannity, less fun, and Rupert Murdoch, even less fun. So the list is getting worse. So we'll just go with Teddy. Teddy Roosevelt has a house there.
I just kept not then wanting to do like the we didn't start the fire and try to with Typhoid Mary. All the different characters.
So that could be like our outro.
Yeah. So, in fact, Billy Joel, just kidding. No, Billy Joel here is 1906. He is but jump at I don't know,
Like
angel baby up in the street.
I don't want to hear Billy Joel Angel Baby.
Okay, so I mean, back to Mr. Monopoly, Charles Henry Warren. He has this big house in Oyster Bay, and he rents out rooms in his residence for others for the summer because
Airbnb
money. Yeah, early Airbnb, money. And obviously these aren't poor individuals who are going to rent these. Like, he's renting it to other rich individuals who want to come out to Oyster Bay for the summer. So for an Irish immigrant at this time, I mean, not a bad gig. I definitely take it. But that peacefulness isn't going to last long, because by August of that same year, 1906, 6 members of the Warren family had become sick with typhoid. And by September, there were 11 in the household, so including also the renters who had gotten ill.
Yeah, that's quick.
So our 3 named Mr. Monopoly, Charles Henry Warren, he's obviously caring immensely about public health. Just kidding. Money. He's immediately worried that people aren't going to want to rent in his home, thinking it's some sort of dead horse dumps.
Yeah, this is where people go and get sick.
Yeah, I'm never going to get over that dead horse photo. He doesn't want that reputation. So he's like, and again, at this time, there already is that reputation of this as a poor people's slum area disease. Right away, he's like, I don't want to lose that money. Where is this coming from? Definitely not in Oyster Bay. So wanting to figure this shit out, he hires an investigator. Ooh, fancy. I like that. Right away. Private investigator to trace the root of this strange outbreak. Ask for the Billy Joel reference. I can't stop thinking of who started the time. It was
I was going to try to say, can you give us some verse? But I guess I didn't even need to prompt you. You already got it.
Got it. The typhoid. Okay. So that's what the investigators.
Well, the world was churning.
It was. Okay, sorry. I can't think of anything else that worked. But back to hiring our investigator. I'm picturing classic, and maybe this is too old of a reference, as a millennial who watched this show when it was like at its peak, when people were like all talking about it. I'm picturing Matthew McConaughey in this role, True Detective McConaughey.
What's the dude's name?
His name is George Sopper. It's Sopper.
Okay.
I'll talk about that in a minute. But
I don't want to disagree with you, but I'm getting Andrew Scott, aka Hot Priest from Fleabag vibes from the name. But wait, what was it? George Sopper? I'm looking this up. Sorry, guys. You guys wait.
Let's see which
one. Nope. It's Matthew McConaughey.
Not Hot Priest.
I mean, he's even got the True Detective mustache.
Bravo. Oh, nice. I didn't even look him up. This was just, my vibes were wrong. I was feeling the wrong vibes. Lately, I've been really good with the guesses. Like in last episode when you were saying how old
John was, 20 years in the naval battle.
I was like, I was really feeling Matthew McConaughey. So, but with like top hats, swirlier mustache, and you bet he's gonna find some fucking answers, and he's gonna find them right.
All right, let's get on it.
Aaron, is it okay? An audience, but I cannot hear you at this moment. But Aaron, is it okay if I call him Investigator McConaughey for the section?
Yeah, we can. I mean, we're already committed to the bit, so
serious historians, don't be mad. I will note again, his real name is George Soper.
I am, for all those people. Yeah, it's Sopper. So look it up.
We should do a side by side. We'll do a side by side.
We will. But if you look it up, you will not be disappointed.
So he has experience tracking. Okay, I'm definitely going to say this wrong. Epidemiological.
Whoa, yeah, I think that is right. That sounded great.
Progress of typhoid. Basically, if we're thinking in COVID world, he's like a contact tracer. So this isn't some amateur. He has done his work before. Baker Warren is really spending that money, right? Now back to Inspector McConaughey. So he's checking the milk supply. Check. It's good. He's checking the well water. Check. Looking good. He's doing the damn work. Right, doing it. He's interviewing. I'm sure he has in his office a lot of red string. I mean, he's, again, literally trying to find, as a contact tracer, you're trying to find who started this was well.
You're patient zero.
Exactly. After all of these interviews and all of that, the string all leads to one person. Oh, damn.
Alert. Typhoid Mary was not the. Like you did epidemiological, okay, but
person. Okay, I'm gonna re-say it because it was gonna be so dramatic. I said, that string all leads to one person,
not
Percy, Mary Mallon. So the typhoid had started after she arrived as a cook. Okay, so that fits right with the timeline. And Mary's signature dessert was some sort of ice cream thing that was topped with fresh sliced peaches. Yeah. All that Inspector McConaughey, he doesn't see that young. He sees uncooked peaches. And he sees something
such a killjoy. Yeah, but I'm gonna level with you. I mean, you're in 1906. There's no AC. It's hot in Oyster Bay. I think I would take a chance with the ice cream, wouldn't you?
And again,
I would take the chance for ice cream, not gonna lie.
And knowing that most people aren't thinking about germs, and honestly, not thinking about with peaches. It's not like ice cream with raw chicken on it. Something like that, right? But he does see uncooked food in the perfect place for our main bacteria. We know her, salmonella, to be present.
Yeah. So if her signature dish had been brownies or something, she'd been fine. But damn, girl, her signature dish had to be ice cream and peaches.
Yeah, not a good start. So not great for Mary. But when is serving fresh peaches a crime, especially when you add on that there aren't campaigns or CDC guidelines on those things? And you don't have those things that we think about. I'm picturing, having worked in schools, like in the kitchen, all this information about health safety codes and all that.
Yeah, there wasn't anything like that.
Okay. But before I go on, I do have to reference, because if you were a listener of our old podcast with our friends Kelly and Aaron, Aaron, during it, she casually called Princess Peaches. And I kept thinking of it in this New York accent, peaches, how's peaches?
Yeah,
that's just also not a great accent.
Like a transatlantic or something.
Yeah. So we gave her a ton of shit for it. And then the Mario movie came out and it redeemed her. And so
I know there's the Peaches song.
So now I'm so angry about that.
If you do want to listen to that moment, which is amazing, our previous podcast with our friends is called, do you want to shout it out, Jamie?
Yeah, To Hell in a Podcast, and I don't know which episode. It's fine. You should just listen to it. It's funny.
Yeah, okay. Listen to them all.
Anyways, as McConaughey spends more time looking into her, he finds something a little more disturbing than peaches.
Strawberries.
No. In the last 10 years, she has worked for 8 families, to my positive knowledge, she would write in 1907. Sorry, I'm not going to do a McConaughey accent. You can do a lower.
Okay, you did 7 of these. You did Billy Joel. You did
7 of the typhoid followed her. She always escaped an epidemic, which she has always been connected. Okay, that got weird. That's like when I
legitimately,
I don't know. When I tried to read Bluey books to the kids, I try to do an Australian accent. It's not good. Okay. If you can understand in my accent,
there's always, but every family she's worked for, they had an epidemic.
And suspiciously, in his mind, she's always escaped. Now, with all these ones that were connected. It sounds a bit ominous, so more than just a coincidence, using that word escaped. I'm not sure I agree with that.
He's not getting sick, obviously.
Yeah, which we'll talk
about. Or at least she hasn't yet.
Which we'll talk about. But in his mind, again, this is a contact tracer. He is, serious about this. He's thinking she sees these families get typhoid and she's like, peace out. Honestly, if I was working in a house, though, and typhoid came along, I'd also be peacing out.
Yeah, I was about to say, I mean, wouldn't that be what you would do? You wouldn't want to stick around and get it, but I understand where he's coming from. I'll give it to him.
Right. You would maybe start getting a little wary if you're That's weird. This is the 8th family I've worked for. And I said, like they always say typhoid after I start working as a cook.
I hate siding with the man in the story, but I'm going to side with him.
Well, maybe not. Maybe not yet.
And well, right now, Inspector McConaughey, I see your point.
To be clear, she is still working in homes as a cook. Like that's her main job, domestic servant and cooking. So
she left Mr. Monopoly's house and now she's gone somewhere else.
Exactly. Now, Inspector McConaughey is even more frantic to find her, figure out where she's at. He does what any good investigator does. He heads to the source. He ends up finding out that she's in a swanky Park Avenue home.
Voila.
Yeah. So he shows up there, her new employer, in March of 1907. And he literally just straight out told her that she was spreading typhoid and he demanded her feces, urine, and blood. And he told her that there have been 22 cases of typhoid linked to her, including one death. But how would you react if you were married?
Buy me dinner first, Mr. Inspector McConaughey. Yeah, I mean, if somebody came and was like, I need your poop and your urine and your blood, please. And also, you've been killing people. Yeah, I don't think I would respond to that great, but I'm just imagining it. I don't know how I would actually act in the moment, but that's where I'm at.
It would definitely be shocking, right? You'd be like, whoa. Who are you, Inspector McConaughey? Just because you have that fancy mustache doesn't mean that I know that you're this inspector, blah, blah, blah.
That doesn't make you a true detective.
Oh.
That was not the real.
Oh, okay. So she basically tosses them out. Actually, a little more than that. I read 2 different sources and they gave 2 different types of cutlery. But one source says a knife and one source says a fork. But some sort of cutlery to get him the hell out. So she's like chasing him out. This is completely ridiculous because she's healthy and she's never come down with typhoid that, she knew of. She had this steady employment and throughout this whole time, again, healthy, showing no symptoms at all. But just to be clear, where Inspector McConaughey is coming from, the science of medicine is slowly catching up. So we aren't blaming illnesses on miasmas anymore. There's this new idea of healthy carriers or asymptomatic carriers of infection. Sound familiar?
No. Yeah. Very familiar.
Right. Exactly. But again, to expect an Irish immigrant working as a cook to know that at that time is pretty damn out there. Like this is really at the forefront, right, of science and medicine. Like unless you were an expert, you're not going to be familiar with it.
And you think even that in 2020, when we were talking about asymptomatic carriers, it was hard enough to get your brain wrapped around. So I can't even imagine if you were an Irish immigrant in 1908, how you would approach that. It would sound completely ridiculous.
It would. Again, he's not explaining like the idea of healthy carrier to her.
Give me your urine.
Right. So she's obviously outraged to be accused of this. I mean, he's accusing her of 22 cases and 1 death. And I think the death was a child, especially because, as I keep saying, she's never had any of these symptoms at any time. So if anything, she's thinking, you have me mistaken for someone else. Where is this coming from? Or this guy is crazy, right? But McConaughey's not going away. He's freaking out. So he's thinking, okay, what am I going to do? First, he's going to follow Mary around the city, still attempting to get the samples himself, which Mary is rightfully weirded out about.
How does he going into like the bathroom? Is he in like the next stall? I'm just seeing some really weird detective work.
So he later calls it this cat and mouse game. But again, that implies that she's like in on it, right? That she knows she has it. And she's like,
you're
not getting my feces.
I understand that he's the good guy. That's pretty weird. You're
right.
Weird.
Like personally, and especially in this time, I mean, women get murdered all the time anyway by men and creepy men. And at this time, and you're an Irish immigrant with no family, I can imagine her being. And they said she was weirded out, but like terrified.
Yeah, I'm getting the ick, and I even know why he's doing it. So
Yeah.
same.
So I don't think she's deviously trying to outrun him at all. I don't agree with his cat and mouse game description. That doesn't work, unsurprisingly. So when it doesn't, he's going to go to the big dogs. He's going to go to the New York Department of Health, who then bring in the police. And they are going to return to Mary. And this time, she's going to have no choice but to turn over those samples.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And hard to say. Again, after he's seemed, again, no symptoms. We've been on her side. Typhoid is detected in all of those
Okay, so they tested it, and he
comes back.
She's carrying it, but again, she's asymptomatic. She isn't sick at all.
Right. Yeah. So it's not like, it came back that she was positive and then she was developing symptoms. Like they said, she's really this like healthy specimen. Like she doesn't have other health problems.
Mm-hmm.
They're panicking because this is all new. They're like, what do we do? So they decide to go with a method that I would deem a little extreme. She's arrested, obviously no warrant or anything like that. And what comes next is going to be even worse. So she's going to be sent to an isolation facility, basically in solitary confinement, because she
can't be around anybody.
Right. She's the only one with typhoid there. This facility also, so it's on Brother Island. It's in the river outside New York. It did house other victims of smallpox and other diseases that the government wanted to confine. So, like, again, this idea of protecting.
I wasn't wrong with the medieval idea of how do you solve leprosy?
Exactly.
In a leper colony, modern day leper colony.
Yeah.
So grim.
I know. When you look at pictures, it's actually like really sad. And I love, like, in the one that you had posted, the like bitch face she's giving the photographer, because that would totally be me. Like,
what are you doing?
Yeah, I'm sent to this isolation facility, and most of the time I can't be around other people because I'm the only one there with typhoid, which is going to
and that's the problem too. Is it would be one thing if they knew how to eradicate it at that point. But she can't be cured. So I understand the point of it, but there is something so sinister about, like you said, no warrant. He technically she hasn't done anything wrong. She didn't poison anybody.
Right. It was not purposeful in any way.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, that for sure is where it's going to become that gray area. But at this time, definitely not purposeful, had no clue, and still really has no clue what's going on, and really still thinks this whole thing is not necessarily made up, but she's going to never, up to the time of her death, admit that she is a healthy carrier of typhoid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it just doesn't compute with her. So you can imagine, obviously, her outrage, confusion over all this. Like we already said, she technically hasn't committed any crimes, and nothing has been maliciously linked. Like Aaron said, it's not like she's like pooping on the pizza.
Yeah, not. She's not. For her, she's like, what? My crime is making delicious desserts. Right. And now you're going to lock me up. Can I ask approximately how old is she?
Oh, gosh. So she was born in, I believe, in 59. Yep. And we're talking about 1907. So,
okay.
Insert definitely not using them. Definitely not calculate.
If our mom's listening to us, our mom is a math major and she doesn't even calculate.
She would be horrified. She's 38. So she's 3 years older than us.
Yeah. Even at the time, it's still so young to be confined for, God knows how, an unlimited amount of time.
Right. There hasn't been a trial, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. New York law actually, though, allowed state health officials to isolate anyone who was what they deemed a public threat. And in this case, they're deeming her a public threat. So now, obviously, this is a forced quarantine. She's not agreeing to be there. In fact, she's very much not agreeing to be there. There's no trial. There's no crime. I read a Time magazine article called "The History of Quarantine is the History of Discrimination." It was actually pre-COVID, focusing on Ebola, but it mentions how her case is brought up whenever there's a fight, right, over the rights of the individual versus protecting the public, which makes sense because this is, again, a very famous case with that. So Mary's rightfully pissed. She's not happy about this, and she's going to challenge this as completely unjust. So a quote from her, she says, "It seems incredible," she said, "that in a Christian community, a defenseless woman can be treated in this manner." Again, which to her defense, no one has tried to sit her down and even explain to her about her unique situation in this time period where the average person, of course, knows so little about germs. Now, she is literate, but these scientific ideas are new and complicated. And even I bet the richest people, Mr. Monopoly would have no idea about.
Yeah. The public is always slow to catch on to those sorts of scientific revolutions.
Yeah. She's going to appeal to the Supreme Court even. She's not going to have a lot of, again, legal victories, but she does have somebody big on her side. William Randolph Hearst.
Oh, nice.
The newspaper magnate. He's a big supporter of her. Why? Probably because her story sold papers. But the newspaper opinion is really sympathetic to her. It is on her side of being like, look at this poor woman. She's being treated horribly. So public opinion very much is more the sympathetic to her.
So I'm surprised. I am surprised that people were not
blaming a woman.
We love to blame a woman. So, I mean, bravo.
Yeah.
For the most part.
Yeah. Now, being plastered all over the papers has positive and negative effects. So the general public knows her and knows the story, which in a way is good because it draws attention to it and it's going to help her get out. And they're generally outraged at how she's been treated. She's able to afford a lawyer. Again, a lot of people think that Hearst paid for her lawyer. But on the same page, it was supposedly these reporters who came up with the infamous nickname Typhoid Mary, which is going to follow her through life and obviously beyond. We're still using that name now. If I said, we're going to do a podcast about Mary Mallon, no.
Yeah, I think one person might know, but a kind of tabloid. Let's say tabloid justice.
It is.
It is. Yeah, very much. Yeah.
Right. And so, legally, again, this doesn't end up going through the courts and doesn't end up really solving that answer of individual versus public. There's a deal struck. A new health official kind of at the top. I forget his exact position, but basically he wants to make this go away. In 1910, so it's been 3 years, a deal is struck. He can be released back into the general public on the condition that she never work as a cook again. Cool. They're not offering her a job or offering her money for her.
Yeah.
Case.
That makes me suspicious. Right. You're just here, I guess you're allowed to leave now. Go have fun. Hopefully we never see you again.
Exactly. That's what they're hoping. Yeah. That this can just go away, stop making them look bad, and she can go out and get a job as a domestic servant who is not cooking or laundry. She's going to have limited options because she's an immigrant and she's a woman during this time. So when more cases of typhoid pop up again in 1915, this has been 5 years since she's been released, you just know Inspector McConaughey. He's just been eagerly waiting for this, the last 4 years.
He knows exactly who he's
rubbing his hands together. I know. Now it's it's go time. Now it's time to find Mary. And Mary can change her name, but she can't escape this one. And no one's going to come to her aid this time, especially with newspapers.
She had her chance.
Public opinion, yeah. So obviously she is found. She's seen as a clear threat to public safety. So her freedom and liberty is deemed way less important than public health. Now, mind you, at the same time, health authorities did admit that in New York City alone, there were probably hundreds of healthy carriers beyond Mary.
Okay.
But he's the only one being punished.
Were they even trying to find anybody else?
That's where it's tricky, right? It's okay, yeah.
You just find your scapegoat.
Yeah. And then you have a answer, we're doing something about typhoid. She's on the island, even though they know.
Not just her. Yeah. It's not just her.
But she's the only one there. Yes, she is sent back to Brother Island. This is where things also get unclear about her guilt. So we don't know exactly how many deaths or cases she was responsible for.
That would be so tricky to trace.
Yeah. But from what I saw, most said 3 deaths in about 51 cases. Now, some sources, though, do say the deaths could be up to 50.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, considering how difficult it is to track those things even now, I can imagine just trying to put that together back then.
Yeah. So it's back to North Brother Island for Mary, where she's going to live out the rest of her 23 years. And I know the last 6 years of her life, slowly dying from the effects of a stroke she had.
Gosh, tragic.
I know. And as I said before, she died still denying she was a carrier. And in fact, again, this is even more to me like kind of gut punching. In fact, the same year she died in 1938, not only are we now having the idea of antibiotics, but the New York Health Department had identified at least 400 asymptomatic carriers of typhoid, but not one of them had been quarantined.
Okay, well, that's bullshit.
Yeah, so that's a tough one to hear. Obviously, gender, class, hysteria all plays a part in her story. Oh, I guess now it comes down to how villainous do we think she is? Is she rightfully deserve that nickname and that image of this, I don't want to say dastardly or like purposefully spreading this disease?
This one's so complicated. Do you want to go first?
I can, yeah.
You presented it. You made me do a John O'Gone one first, so you go first.
Okay. I'm really actually pro Mary. I'm like,
ooh,
yeah. If I was doing a reel, I'd have like, which I might like being like a protector of her. Now, I'm not going to say 100% non-villain. I'm going to add in, I would say 90% not villain, 10% villain. That 10% being that she did go back to work as a cook after being told, this is your condition on being relieved. The reason why I'm only going to say 10% is because I really do not think she thought that A, she spread it in the first place, and B, would spread it again. I think
I'm going to do devil's advocate and say, just because you don't realize or it's not on purpose doesn't mean that you can still hurt people that way. I mean,
she was given a good deal. I mean, she was let off this island. Like, she could have lived the rest of her life in New York City as a domestic servant, not around food.
But I fully understand that would be a raw deal to take for somebody who's used to working in nice homes, and usually those things include room, board.
Exactly. So
yeah.
I'm thinking, while she knew it was wrong she went back as a cook, she really didn't think it was, she knew she was breaking that promise that she had made, like to be released. But in her mind, she wasn't doing anything wrong because she had no idea and denied being this asymptomatic carrier, even till her death. So she's like, if I'm going to do this, I'm really not hurting anyone because it's not me doing it. So that's where I think like her viewpoint. And then obviously as a woman, she makes like that whole piece that at that time and being publicized, especially as you get further on when are more things to treat typhoid and knowledge of other asymptomatic carriers.
It's impossible to defend when you're treating one specific person one way and not others who fall within that same parameter.
Right. It's not like she had a trial and, she was guilty of not following the orders or something like that. It was just...
Yeah. Well, I think hers is a lot like, there's always a debate around crime prevention. You can't put somebody away because you think that they're going to commit a crime. In this case, putting some away, I get that. Yeah, obviously she did infect people, but the reason that
most likely.
Although, there's obviously always a chance that there could have been multiple sources of typhoid at the time, but I'm probably closer to maybe 60-40 or 70-30.
Okay.
I mean, my heart breaks for her thinking all that time on an island, without people, solitary confinement. I think we know a lot nowadays that it is bad for mental health, bad for people in general. So to do that to somebody for not really a good reason, that's a really hard pill to swallow. But I also,
Yeah, I mean, especially if we're just talking about isn't been found guilty of any crime.
yeah. But I also understand after she had gone back to cooking, she had given a warning, she had gotten a chance that at that point they couldn't trust her. But, you had already put her on the island before. So they're only too happy to throw a woman back on the island and say, well, sorry, like we're locking away the key or throwing away the key.
Yeah.
I find her story really tragic.
Yeah.
But even if she didn't understand what she was doing, she still likely hurt people.
Yes.
Yeah. Even if it wasn't intentional.
Yeah. And that's where I get that 10 or maybe even 15%. Like I could even do it like 85, 15. Like because there was obviously most likely some harm done. And she did consciously make the choice to break that. I don't want to say promise, but that was her condition to leave. That was conscious, but I think again, her mindset, her perspective of it wasn't I'm breaking it because I want to make more money necessarily. I mean, I think money was probably a component, but it was more like I don't think
we can't discount money when she's a Irish immigrant woman.
Right.
I'm assuming, by herself. She's not married. She's not dependent upon a man to bring in another income. So, she's not looking for money's sake. She needs money to survive.
Right. And so I can see that justification of, I think what they're saying is crazy. I don't think I'm going to hurt anybody. On the other hand, again, like you were saying, she does change her name. I mean, but again, to be fair, she knows she's not going to be hired if she comes in as Mary Mallon. Yeah. And she does move around a lot, like trying to not
get caught.
Yeah, in a way that
she knows she's doing something wrong, even if she doesn't believe even if she doesn't believe in a thing that is an asymptomatic carrier, she still knows she's doing something wrong.
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't want to get caught. Like, she's trying to evade Inspector McConaughey. He's just anxiously waiting. And, once those cases start popping up.
Do you think if she had been Typhoid Thomas, if she had been a man, that it would have been the same sort of outrage?
Potentially as an immigrant man, maybe, because I think that, again, when you bring in class and immigration status, but I think there wouldn't have been as much outrage. There's something about like a woman, like it brings that idea, like you were saying, like poisoning, like that she's maliciously spreading, like the one that we have on one of our social media. Like,
I believe it'll be posted.
There's these little goals that are coming out of her. That she's cooking. So it's like this idea that she
all that kitchen imagery, like womanly imagery kind of thing.
Yeah, something about that. And then just the idea that men, I guess what type of job, like they most likely wouldn't be a cook, but they could be a butcher or, also working with food.
Yeah, but I think even an immigrant man would have, I think, a little bit more options in terms of what he could do.
Yeah.
If they had said, sorry, you can't cook, obviously it's still limited in terms of your status and so forth, but not with that gender.
Right, exactly. And again, keeping in mind that she was literate, which for at the time. Not that I want to say it's fairly uncommon for, I would say, I don't know the percentages, but knowing, again, that the Great Famine had decimated Ireland right before, like the fact that she comes over and she is literate, does have some education. And so a literate man who's an immigrant, I think could find, some not, we're not saying the best type of job, but he would have certainly more options.
Yeah, for women, it's service and the factory. That's pretty much it.
Right. Well, that's Typhoid Mary.
Very
uplifting.
It was really sad.
I know. But, and then that makes me be like, I'm so proud of my reel.
We will be posting some content on Instagram and TikTok on our Ambivalent Offenders podcast account. So we're trying to engage with you guys. So take a look for those coming. Jamie, I was going to do a little preview for our next episode.
Oh yeah, yep. Because you also switched topics on us, and you just told me this today, and I would never in a million years have guessed that you would have chosen this topic.
Yeah, girlies, we're going modern.
We're still doing women, feminine rage.
Vain, ice queen, frigid, addict. These are just a few of the terms thrown at our next subject after she married America's most eligible bachelor. Join us next week to explore the life and afterlives of Carolyn Bessette Kennedy.
I'm excited for that one because I know very little besides like the plane crash and like, again, just basics about her life, but not much.
I think it'll be a good one. So like we said, please follow us on Instagram at Ambivalent Offenders Podcast and TikTok under the same name. Jamie, do you want to see us out?
Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Continue to like, subscribe, even give us ideas.
We'd love to hear
of a specific person. We'd love to hear that. So thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.